Hi, everyone. Welcome to another in our podcast series of Real Life, Real People. The series is designed to promote the real skills that I think it takes to manage our lives and hopefully thrive, especially when dealing with early difficulty in childhood or even current struggles, which we all go through. Now, my name is Sue Firth, and I'm a performance coach and business psychologist. And today I have Dominic O'Sullivan with me. So welcome, Dominic.
Welcome, Sue. Thanks for having me on here.
Now, tell me a bit more about yourself and what you do.
I'm ex-military. After about 15 years, started working, eventually setting up my own business. Had a family of my own. I've gone through relationships, divorce, new relationships, running a business, all those things at the same time.
But I think those laps around the block have actually given you quite a significant start in a funny sort of way, haven't they? I mean, one of the first observations I made, I think, is that life has sometimes been very emotionally tough for you. So what do you feel is your main coping mechanism, do you think?
I tend to compartmentalize things.
Yeah. So I think one thing I observed really was that you worked pretty hard on being able to do that. And unfortunately for you, there were numerous circumstances in your early life. I know that not many of those you'd necessarily want to share with us, but I think you were good enough to share them with me. So they gave me quite a significant insight into you. And I think that early exposure to really chronic discomfort, distress, pain, we all tend to need some kind of toolkit in our kit bag, I think, which helps us cope with that. So I would say one of the things that came out that was quite marked for you is your ability to focus. And I think when you focused, all else was put back in their boxes. That seemed to strike me as the primary way you coped, yes?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely a younger version of me, and through sort of teenage years in particular, and into the time I joined the military, was very much about sport. You're talking about 6 a.m. training sessions, and again then at 4 p.m. So twice a day. Your social life is completely dominated by what's going on around that, and it becomes almost an escape. There's no time for anything else. So it's just a case of train hard, work hard, total dedication towards that goal. And actually, I think some of the other issues, I'm not saying it necessarily solves them, because in some cases, those dragged with me until kind of later life. But there's certainly other things just kind of lessen the impact of them to a point where they then become manageable, rather than trying to deal with them at the very moment they occur, which, and I look back on now and things that I deal with now, at the very moment they happen, it's too raw. But I think working on something else until such time as it just calms down enough that you can rationally deal with it.
Yeah. So in a way, really, you probably didn't even necessarily realize that that was an advantageous skill, and that actually what you were learning was to drive your energy and possibly even negative emotions, let's say anger, frustration, aggression, something like that, into your sport or into doing something else for a designated period of time. And then I think it's almost easier to come back out of that because you're feeling calmer and then know what to say or then know how to cope, even if actually the situation that you're required to cope with is quite possibly beyond any other part of your coping mechanism because you don't have one yet.
Yeah, and I think particularly, and I'm not necessarily just because you're younger, but of course, I was born in the 60s, men didn't talk to other men about anything, men didn't open up about anything, and it was, stiff upper lip and all that kind. I went into the military, which was another environment which you just don't talk about stuff. So I think having that outlet for me just meant that it kind of kept me from boiling over, anger issues and things like that. I used to use that feeling, that frustration, that anger to kind of fuel my training. So I was able to just drive myself through training for events just almost on pure anger at times. Obviously, as time goes on, you learn to kind of when to turn that on and off. And again, you try not to be emotional, try and be rational, but there are times when aggression is required, particularly in the military environment, and in certain sporting environments, it's an asset to have that, but channeled aggression, not violent aggression as such.
And that's actually interesting because there is something of a difference, isn't there? Because you see young men, for example, they head out for an evening and with alcohol in them, which has depressed all their ability to not get angry, their anger boils up and over, and it can be about an unrelated thing. You know, they're angry with the world, they're angry with their parents,
Yeah.
they're angry with something else. And it just boils over into what I might, for differentiation purposes, call violence. And then they just smack the living daylights out of something or someone. And it's that uncontrolled aggression, which has never really, as we would say, been very good for us in life. But yours, if I may differentiate, was controlled anger, wasn't it? That's what you chose to do. You turned that into being competitive, really, but in your sports.
Yeah, and I've heard, and I, you know, I'm not invented the phrase, but I've heard, you know, in the rugby world that I, you know, spent a lot of time in, where people will be, you know, 98% aggression, but that top 2 inches, that 2%, your brain's in the freezer. You are just completely calculated, so you can channel that aggression and that, you know, physical aggression in a very disciplined way. And I think, you know, when I look at the likes of boxers, for instance, and I look at people in contact sports, they can't just lash out, they can't just be violent, because technically that doesn't work anyway in those kind of settings. They have to find a way of generating force, generating power and aggression within the kind of technical aspects of a sport. So they've got to channel it, they've got to use it in the right way. And actually, if you do that, there's a real satisfaction in, you know, in a rugby world, you know, a big collision with a big tackle. There's something quite satisfying about that. It's not going out and punching people on the field to get the better of them. It's to dominate them physically and part mentally as well. I think, you know, you dominate someone mentally by getting the upper hand, by, you know, just constantly being on that edge, but not stepping over the edge.
No.
And I think that's something that I've been able to do for a long time in different sports. You know, there's different levels of physical contact required in the sports that I played over the years, but they've all been about channeling energy. And I suppose energy is probably a better word than aggression, really, in some ways. But I think there's a massive, massive difference, as you said, from the lads that go out on a Friday night and they haven't maybe got rid or can't channel that aggression, and it comes out in a violent way rather than in a useful way.
Yeah. So, for example, when you first started, you were a competitive sportsman at swimming. And then, as you said, you went on to do varying other sports after that.
Yeah.
So when you developed the skill of swimming, do you think you were conscious on any level that there was a thought process that went into it, wherein you said to yourself, right, I can't deal with that right now. I'm just going to get in the pool. I'm just going to do whatever. Were you conscious of it? I'm just wondering how to teach other people to do it. Or did you feel that the thing you just said was, not now, this is it, this is all I'm going to do?
Yeah, I think, and in the work that I do in business and through my work in the fitness industry, we look about behavior change in people starting exercise habits and so on. And I look at behavior change models, and I look back at those times, and there's almost, you develop a habit, a good habit, by just doing something repetitively. And part of that swimming background was, there's a routine, there's a schedule that you turn up at 6 o'clock, you do 2 hours, you follow what you're told to do. And I mean, it's a conveyor belt in a way. You just step on and bang, bang, bang. And then you get to the end of the session and you're waiting for the next one. And you do that 6 days a week, and things just are automatic. You're not even stopping to think about it. So, and it's tiring. You know, you're talking as a 14 to 18-year-old constantly being tired. So you haven't got time to get wound up about other things or even divert to other things. But I think through this, the thing the swimming side of things taught me was self-discipline. I think it was as well about, sometimes you just have to do what you're told. And I suppose that was an easy step then for me going into the military, because you recognize when you've got to follow some plan or some direction. So I'm not sure there was always a conscious decision to go, right, I need to do this because this will help me deal with so-and-so. It was all more of just an automatic response to the situation rather than overthinking it, maybe. I think, you know, if I'd go through things now, I'd probably think a little bit more. But then I just turn up and train and do as I'm told.
No, definitely.
But it's kind of helped me as a young man, I think, more.
Yeah. No, I can understand that. Thank you. But I think the thing about going into the military, which interests me, is that, as you say, really, there is obviously the process of being taught to be told what to do. That's a skill. You have to do whatever you are told. And there's a risk in a way, because if you also know you're the type of personality, which you obviously are because you started your own businesses since, who actually prefers to do their own thing, you've got to either do as you're told or do your own thing. And there's something of a trick in life about being able to do as you are told, but do it respectfully and honorably, or whatever you want to call it, so that you can apply that discipline and still succeed. And I think you get into tricky territory, don't you?
Yeah, I do think there's some slight misconceptions about the military as well, because in the old days of you watch things like Get Some In or Ain't Half Hotman, and you got the sergeant major kind of bellowing at everyone, Windsor Davis, bless him, and people think that you go in and they just shout at you. And if you go back years, then they're probably more of a degree of that. But actually, what they do is they look for weakness. They probably break you down, but then you understand your part in a team, in an organization where you're contributing. Your contribution is somewhere in that chain. It might not be at the top of it, but you realize that you're an important cog in that wheel, and then you're built up. So actually, your confidence levels, your self-esteem, your self or ability to look after yourself is far greater when you get to the end. You're more intelligent, you think better, all those sort of things. So actually broken down but built back up. So actually the whole military thing for me almost multiplied a lot of the things that I kind of had when I went in, and the disciplines I got from the swimming training. It was an easy step for me, the discipline side, but actually I still got broken down, and I got built back up better than I was before. So I think as time goes on, because everyone goes into the military as pretty much as a young man, they go as school leaver, they go in at 18, 19, and let's be honest, in some cases we don't know that much about ourselves. I think as you get towards 10 plus 12 plus years into the military, you start to think differently. It was a very different Air Force I left than the one I joined, and my expectations or aspirations had obviously grown in that time as well. So for me to leave, I left at the right time, but the time that I had in was a great journey. Really I didn't think at the end like I did at the beginning.
No, and I get that actually, because I think in anything that we do, we mature. Yeah. And obviously as a mature man, or as if that's an okay compliment, because often maturity seems to be confused with age. So as an older man,
getting old,
not quite what I'm saying.
Doesn't mean getting more intelligent.
Yeah, quite. But one of the things that I've spotted, for example, is coming out of the military can often be a really tricky phase. It can be a very tough phase in people's lives. And I find that my experience with various different consultancies I've worked with has often come across people, okay, perhaps they have come out of combat, which is particularly acute for them. But then when they try to come into what you might call civilian life, it can be really difficult, because now they have to stand down. So now they are responsible for themselves. They have to drive their own world. They have to be in control of everything they do. They've no longer got that teamship and that camaraderie to fall back on. So how did you cope with that?
That's quite interesting, because I never really, when I was in, I never really deemed myself as the nickname you would have got is a kind of NATO potato or a cabbage, where you just follow. That was always the phrase that was used, and I never quite saw myself as that much of a blind sort of follower, if you like. I kind of accepted everything and I got along with it, but I didn't see myself. But I do see a lot of old colleagues who've come out who really struggle without the security of all the things that come with the military, which might go down as far as the reduced rate for housing and so forth. So they really struggle. But when I came out, I mean, I was ready to leave when I did, but I think I genuinely think I was quite fortunate in the timing. And And there was well, certainly not just the timing, but the environment I went into, because it was the place I went to work first was looking for someone with leadership ability, and I had a certain presence about me when I kind of walked into the organization, and it was commented on. And it was funny because the very first day that I was there, they had a car valeter whose car, the van, caught fire. And of course, they were in Harrogate, very well-to-do. The car park was full of very, very high-value cars. And of course, the people inside were panicking because this thing's gone up and it's like a fireball. But to me, I saw an IED. I saw a situation where you put a cordon around, you push people back and so forth. And I just stepped in, kind of took charge, 25-meter cordon, etc., etc. And everyone was just, crikey, this guy knows what he's doing. But actually, the military side of me was almost welcomed. It was like, that's just what we need. And I, without sounding too rude about it, there was a very well-to-do clientele at this particular club, and they actually wanted somebody to, the old beasting, they wanted someone to be forceful, and they liked the idea of having that military concept, if you like. The reality of it was, I can be a big teddy bear like anyone else, but when the needs must, you kind of flip into military mode. And I just landed in a place where that was exactly what they wanted. But I'd seen other friends of mine who'd gone out, and the places they were trying to go into or to work, they really wanted things toned down. They didn't want the regimental sergeant major. They wanted the edges kind of filed down, so this person was more friendly and soft and what have you. And of course, some people just can't make that switch.
No, and that's quite a struggle. Yeah, and I can see that. I would think that that's quite a struggle to fit. Whereas the beauty for you was that you were actually able to blend pretty quickly, but step up at the same time and utilize skills that would be advantageous.
Yeah.
They obviously then valued those.
I was actually keener to tone things down.
Yeah.
I actually kind of wanted to kind of step away, but I'm almost kind of found that actually that's what they want me to be.
Yes.
So it wasn't difficult. I mean, I didn't nowhere near at the level that I was, at if I was in the military, but it seemed to them that I was. But yeah, I think the ability to adapt to your environment and to your audience has served me pretty well in terms of then in business. When I'm stood in front of chief executives one day, the next day I'm stood in front of gym instructors, personal training, and obviously the approach or the way that I present is slightly different. But I think that's something that I've learned, and I didn't realize I'd learned it as well as I had, really. But it's definitely a skill coming out.
So I think if we talk about your life from the point of view of the skills and strengths that it's developed in you, I would say that what we've covered so far is your focus, your discipline, the fact that you are fit, or that what you did was drive your abilities into sport. I think what we've also identified is that you said you had strong leadership skills, that you stepped up and utilized those in that particular job. But I also think that what you are probably describing, which is why you had the ability to be able to talk to almost anybody, was really what you see is what you get with you, isn't it? You are very transparent, you're very much yourself. And I think that's very important in life, because we mustn't put on this some kind of misguided belief that people want a facade. They want something like a coat that we stick on and take to work. If we do that, I tend to find work-life balance becomes particularly tricky, because that is really rather like having to take that off when you go home. If you are one and the same, and the choices that you make and the type of work that you do suits you, then I think you don't need to take this on and off the same, do you? You are yourself.
I think if you're trying to be one thing, during the day, and then you go home and you're trying to be something else, I think it's exhausting.
Yeah.
Because you're constantly battling. There's an internal battle going on there. It's interesting, it's Father's Day today, as we mentioned earlier. And I had a comment from my daughter today, and my daughter's typical. She's 23, 24, busy life, etc. If I get a phone call from her a month, that's great. But she wrote in a card, she said, as you've got older, you've got more sensitive.
Oh.
And I was kind of like, tear in my eye. Despite the exterior, I had a tear in my eye. But I kind of stopped and thought for a minute, and I think actually I just let her see me.
Yes.
I'm probably guilty at one particular stage in my life where I was, home life was one thing, work life was other, and that they were in conflict, and I wasn't happy having that conflict, but I couldn't seem to get out of it. Now, as you said, what you see is what you get. If I'm emotional, I'm emotional in work or I'm at home. I don't have a split personality anymore.
No.
And I took that from her today, actually, as a bit of a kind of endorsement, really. I think she was happy about that as well, because obviously your kids, you can't hide from stuff.
No, I agree. No, but I also think that what you're owning, really, and stipulating to other people is, be brave, be yourself. But I think one of the things that comes out in your history, which you've shared with me, is owning your own mistakes. What do you feel that actually means?
Oh, well, as I said earlier on, I was brought up in a generation where you didn't talk openly about things, and I think there was also a thing you maybe didn't want to let people down. But by not admitting to things and trying to hide it, you might thought, I can get away with that, or not. People can't see that side of me. And I think now I'm very much like own the mistake. If you've made a mistake, put your hand up and say, look, I've made a mistake. I've forgotten our appointment or whatever that is, and just have to be honest. And I just think sometimes if you get in front of it, whether it's in business and with a customer, you haven't sent a proposal on time or whatever, I'd send a message to say, look, I know I promised you this on Thursday. I've got tied up with something else, but I will have it to you by Friday. I'd rather do that and then deal with any comeback than wait for the deadline to go past and wait for an email to come from the customer saying, where's the thing you promised me? But I think too often people, they see that as a weakness.
Yeah.
And I don't. I see the opposite of that. I think the weakness is trying to, bluff your way through things, or not admit that you are the one that's made the mistake. And I was taught this lesson when I was in the military, actually, by a boss. God rest his soul, he's gone now. A guy called Ted Bishop, and he said to me, he said, right, you're starting out in your career, you will make mistakes. If you don't make mistakes, it's because you haven't tried to do anything. And that was his attitude. He said, I want you to try things. You're going to make a mistake. And when you do, we'll have a chat about it. I'll back you up to other people. Behind the scenes, you might tear a strip off me. But what he gave me the confidence to do was say, I'm going to have a go. I'm going to try something. If it doesn't work, I'll say, it didn't work, whatever. And actually, it's quite liberating in a way, because you're not afraid. And you read in sport and so on where coaches put their arm around a player and says, I want you to express yourself. I want you to go out and do your best. And they feel like it's okay if I don't make a pass or I don't do something, rather than that fear and being paralyzed by the fear of making a mistake. And I'm the same in through sport and through work. I just think I think it's priceless. I cannot imagine now going into an environment where I'm afraid to do something different and make a mistake. Just doesn't
but
fit
also,
with me.
Perhaps there's an attitude about mistakes, isn't there, that each of us has to learn in our own way. And I think one of the ways where it becomes vital is in business, that accountability and taking accountability for the errors that you make, or that you could have done it better, and this is how I think I need to do it better, is part of the learning process. And that's all it really means. And very senior people who find fault with you, criticize you, why are you for approval, and therefore disapproval always means everything, the world is just going to explode on you, do us no favors at all. Because instead of learning the skill, how to pick ourselves back up and then go for it again, which I've commonly seen is really about resilience, we don't learn resilience. We learn instead to crawl away or not put ourselves forward or not try, because actually those bring out the weaker part of us, because we don't feel we can be ourselves. So it's really part of a much bigger topic around what resilience really is. And I can definitely see that the number of times you've picked yourself back up, apart from the accountability piece, is also in there in terms of the ingredients of resilience, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And I think, there's been some failures. I'm quite open about the fact that, I've had some failures in business where it just hasn't worked out. I've tried something, it's not worked out. So what do I do at that point? Do I go, right, you haven't got any good ideas, don't ever try anything again? Or do you go, okay, maybe I got the timing wrong, maybe I just kind of, didn't there were certain things I didn't factor in. But no, I've said no. I think I've got something, I'm going to have another go. Another go. And like I said, it's not everything you do is going to work first time and work perfectly. And if a slight setback stops you from doing anything in the future, that's a negative. That's a message I try and teach my kids. And again, my other daughter said this morning, she said, you've always taught me to keep going and to come back and have another go and stuff. So I'm not one that's not easily subdued, but I'm not put off by failure.
No. I think that's pretty important, actually, for everybody to listen and hear, because you, I believe they need to hear, have been hugely successful, had money, which most people would clarify as one of the measures of the success. You've done incredibly well, and then you lost it all. And really, in that state of having lost it all, instead of sitting there feeling completely sorry for yourself and thinking, okay, this is crap, life is never going to be good again, you literally just picked yourself back up. You examined what it was about you that was good, that was going to drive this forward, that was going to achieve again. And you went back in and did the same kind of model, but in a different or better way. And that's the way that you tend to think, isn't it? You just go for it again. You reset the goals and go for it again.
Yeah, definitely. And I think if I hadn't done that, the alternative would be, well, go back into employment and get a job with someone. And I think, if you've run your own business or you've been self-employed, I think that would be even more soul destroying, because you'd have that itch that you want to be your own boss. You've had the freedom or the benefits of doing that, and then you go back to work for someone else, and you're all. I think that to me would be almost like accepting a failure, rather than saying no, that failure is not going to define me. I'm going again. I need to do certain things differently, and I need to do things better. But I think, the get up and go again, the Phoenix from the ashes scenario is that I think that's a much better way. Otherwise you just crawl up and curl up and sit in the corner, and that's not good.
That doesn't work, does it? So just so that people can understand, those that go self-employed would often say they wouldn't go back to employment again, but those who are employed never really understand why we want to live with the insecurities of being self-employed. So how do you think you work out, how as a person do you think you work out which one you are?
I think when I first started, I mean, I could look at it now, I was in employment, I kind of good start of it, good career in the military, came out, start of a good career outside of the military. But I kind of felt that there were always going to be limitations, and the limitations I felt the limitations were created by the person who owned or ran that business. So if they didn't have the foresight or the vision or the desire to push to a point, I was never going to be able to get there, because they were the blocker almost in a way. And it wasn't a case of me saying, look, I can run your business better, but it was a case of, I really want to, in my remit, I want to take this as far as we can. And it was, no, we will take your ideas, great, but the financial reward as well, there was a ceiling, there was a pay structure. You were never going to earn more than a certain amount. And I had taken a pay cut coming out of the military. And I thought, how long do I want to stay almost kind of subdued? So it was a great stepping stone coming out, the first job that I took. But I kind of thought, I need to kind of go further than this. And I couldn't see another way other than taking my ideas and my methods and basically setting up myself.
Yeah.
So I kind of took the plunge. I didn't have a client list. I had my paycheck from the end of the month. And I probably had a big set of kahunas, because I just kind of went after it and just yeah, I just went and approached another company and said, look, I think I can provide a service for you that is lacking within what you do, etc. And lo and behold, they went, yeah, we need that.
Right.
And bang. I mean, relationships that I'd had through work, and I kind of pushed on those, and they gave me the opportunity, and yeah, it grew pretty rapidly. But I quickly kind of got to the point, and I think I said to someone, I don't think I'd want to take another job, but also I don't think I'm employable.
No.
And I think that wasn't a cockiness or anything, but it was a case of anyone that would take me on would have to match my ambition and drive, because otherwise I'd feel again like I was in second gear rather than getting up into fourth gear.
Yeah.
And I just didn't want to put myself in that situation. So it was, I think I resided myself to that fact that you better make it on your own here now, because you're just not going to find a job that's going to make you happy. And to be honest, that was 2002 that I started. We nearly would, 2002. So, we're nearly coming up to sort of 20 years of self-employment.
Pretty much.
More time self-employed than I spent in the military. I did 15 years in the military, very much employed. So yeah, I think when I first started, did I think I'd ever work for someone again? I don't know. I thought, well, if it doesn't work, maybe I will. But then soon I was like, I wouldn't want to go back.
No. So just drawing some kind of conclusion from that, really, it genuinely feels to me as if you almost have to be just a little bit unhappy, if not actually quite unhappy with what you're doing, before you're then able to say, do you know what? I want this to change. And then you work out, I know how I want to change it, and this is what it's going to be. And then you start to drive that. So I'm just wanting to reiterate that for people so that they recognize there's nothing wrong with being a little bit unhappy, actually, if the unhappiness is teaching you what it is you want instead.
Yeah, because I think why would people leave a pretty secure career? Why would I leave the military? I could have stayed another 7 years, got a full pension, and if I could have just stayed put. And then I come out and I get into a job, and I could have stayed put there as well. And I take the massive risk of giving up on a start of the second career to go self-employed with no client list, with no funds, with a young family as well. At that stage, I had two children, 2 young children under 3, and 2 stepchildren as well, and massive risk. And I never would have put myself down as, a risk taker as such, and you look at the entrepreneurs and say, you're risk averse, or you're a risk taker. And I wouldn't have said I was a risk taker, but looking at it now, I think you pretty much rolled the dice with everything on the table. But it, I think for me, it just felt like that was following my, whether it was my head or my heart, I don't know, but it was something I had to go after.
Yeah. So I would agree then, really, that what you said, I think, apart from your many strengths, is be brave and follow your heart and follow what you think is right. And even if that does mean you're going to take a risk, as you said, the fallback is that I could always go back into employment. But really what you did was push yourself to such a degree that you said, actually, this is worth a go and I can do this. And I think that headspace, you'd already seen proof positive that you could do this, really, when you look back at your early career as a swimmer. You'd gone into the military, you'd gone into business for yourself. So I think in some kind of conclusion for people, is there anything else that you feel you would want to try to offer, which says in a nutshell, what is it that they need in order to get successful or to support themselves through difficulties or challenges in life?
Yeah, I think a big part of the sporting side, but also from a work point of view, is having a target. And I think I need targets from now that I kind of do a lot of charity events which involve physical endurance events. I have to have a goal. If I don't have a goal, I can drift physically and mentally. I think on the physical side with the sporting type stuff I do now, I can be the laziest man in the world, believe it or not. I can literally, I can do nothing for months. And I went through a phase in life where I didn't do anything. I ballooned in weight and out of shape and so on because I had nothing to train for. You make something to train for, and I can be completely driven. I'm at the stage I'm at now. If I was 16, 17 again, and in my head was inside one of these young, talented sort of athletes, my brain could probably make them an Olympic champion. And people have said that to me. Said you have that total commitment to something. And I think on the business side, I kind of look, okay, what are the goals for me on the work side of things? What are you trying to get to? Because otherwise, why do you even turn the laptop on in the morning? You're just drifting along. So I think for me, it all comes down to setting a target. And I said, once you've got that, I work backwards from that point. Say, right, what do I need to do 6 months time, 3 months time, 2 months tomorrow? Right now, what do I need to do now? And that kind of then fires the whole schedule for the day, the week. You can organize your time because it's all pointing towards a certain target that you're aiming for. And I've changed targets sometimes when you go, actually, we kind of need to refocus, or we need to go after someone else. But I think having that initial target in mind, and something that I've only done really in later life is also, and I'll actually say, I think more important than the personal side and the business side is actually having some goals for your family. And I think on the personal side, I think that's where in the last 7 years in particular, I've become a lot more complete in terms of how I feel and balanced about things, because I made them the priority. I made, nice. Having some targets, what a relationship I want with my kids, with sister and other people, and actually making those, saying if I want that relationship to be as good as it can, then I've got to do some things to make it happen. It's not just going to happen because you're making money in business. That doesn't make your family happy. Your kids, when they're little, want time with you. They don't care if you earn 80 or 90 grand a year if you're not spending any time with them when you come through the door at the end of the day. So and you learn some painful lessons. You don't get to that point straight away. You almost have to go through a bit of pain to arrive at that point. And if I could pass on to anyone who is early in business or in that point where they're making money and they're doing lots of things and they're doing really well on the business side, they're not looking after themselves personally. And the bit in the middle is the family isn't getting the best of them. They're getting the second best of them. And I feel quite sad when I see people stuck in that position, because I think I've been there and I know exactly what it feels like, and it's horrible.
Yeah.
Horrible.
And there's no doubt that comes back around to trip you up, I think. So in a nutshell then, it's interesting that setting goals is very important to you, but I also think, funnily enough, don't get lardy, because when you do, you lose your drive. And what you have actually found is that your fitness not only ties in with your ability to drive your goal setting, but you don't have to be a superior athlete. It's just that fitness is what enables and maintains your ability to stay on top of your goals and drive your energy and your enthusiasm into it, really.
Yeah, I think the physical things that I do actually keep my mind sharp as well.
Yeah.
And they make me feel refreshed. They make me feel like, I finished my training and I'm like, bang, I want to work. But then, don't be afraid to be a little bit unconventional as well, because, the tradition, when I first started working for myself, I thought I had to start work at 8 a.m. and work till the last email came in at the end of the night, and you're doing 12, 13-hour days just constantly in front of a laptop or a phone. And now I kind of tend to work in very short bursts. I do an hour and a half, and I walk away from it. And I might go and have a coffee, or I might go and do a ride or whatever, and I come back to it. But when I come back to it, I'm far more productive in an hour and a half than if I'd stayed in front of that screen for 4 hours. And I find that mental sharpness and that mental fitness, if you like, and the ability to kind of to think quickly and to be positive is inextricably linked with me being physically active.
Yes. Yeah.
And actually, if I'm not physically active, I actually feel lethargic mentally, as well as, you know, I just don't feel like, you don't even want to look at the screen, or you don't want to make a phone call, and you have to, you know, you have to give yourself a kick sometimes. So yeah, so the physical well-being and exercise for me is all. I can't, if I take that away, everything else would start to wobble.
Unravel, wouldn't it? Yeah.
Mm.
Well, Dominic, I really want to thank you very much for your time, and also the message and really the key skills that you've passed on to people today, because I think genuinely what we've picked up about you are not only a number of strengths, but also a number of actual tools that you've used, and those are really valuable. I've always tried to say to people, I believe that there's a toolkit to handling your life well, really. And if you don't learn those tools, I think that's when anxiety and sometimes depression, certainly drifting, starts to take hold of us, really. So my genuine thanks to you for coming online today. And I'm very much hoping that I'm going to be able to help people handle their lives a little bit better and certainly benefit from what they've learned from today. So thank you very much for your time.
Pleasure. Thank you.